Hi, welcome to this episode of Industry Voice. Today we have Theresa Blissing and Michael Waitze. How's everyone doing today?
Just wanted to say I'm really happy because I've just like an hour ago seen Michael in person for the first time since when was it? We saw each other last time in Singapore at ITC, right? That was 2020?
22, 2021, 2022. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. It was a long time ago the last time we saw each other in person. It's weird though, right? Because we talk to each other at least once a week.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's strange. It feels like we see each other a lot more often than we actually do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And I have to say, you didn't age a bit.
I'm not sure what to say, but thank you.
So,
how are you, Jeff?
I'm good. I am excited for this episode. And I've been on your podcast, Michael.
You have.
I'll let you talk about your podcast, but I'll talk about my experience. My experience on your podcast was great. I've been on 30 plus podcasts before I decided to launch my own. And I told you that our podcast experience was one of my favorite because you really asked some of the best questions. And even off the cameras, when we started talking, and I was like, man, this guy really gets it. I've been studying creators and before I launched my podcast for 2+ years, just thinking about it. And after talking to you, so there was two people that really inspired me to do this. And you were one of the two. So before we get this episode started, I just want to put that out there. You know, our episode and our conversation has inspired me to jump in the water. So thank you for that. And now I got that out of the way. I'd love for our audience to get to know Theresa and Michael. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Maybe we just have Theresa go first and then Michael follow. And how'd you get into insurance and how'd you guys end up creating one of the most amazing podcasts in our community?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the insurance industry my entire life, it feels like. I grew up and my dad had an insurance agency, so maybe I had no other choice but joining the insurance industry. And I started my career 20 years ago now. It was August 2004 with Italian insurer Generali in Germany. So I was born in Germany, worked for Generali first in Germany, then moved to Hong Kong with Generali. That was back in 2009, so a very different time. And then after 10 years working for Generali, I decided there must be more in life than working for just one insurance carrier. And switched to management consulting, also went back into university, did an academic research study on the adoption of big data. And that was my segue into, more things, tech and innovation in the insurance industry. And then there was also in Asia, in Bangkok, started speaking at a lot of conferences, like really the first wave of insurtech, or even insurtech didn't exist, the term back then when I started this journey. And then I met Michael in Bangkok I think we met in like 2018.
Yeah, 2019, I think was the first time we met. And yeah, keep going, but I'll tell part of the story as well because it's kind of insane, but go ahead.
And we met and we decided to start the Asia InsurTech podcast, which is one of the longest running podcasts. I mean, it was the first in Asia, is one of the largest podcasts in the world now. And it has been an amazing journey. We have, made so many great connections across Asia, but also globally. And also thanks to the Asia InsurTech podcast, I got to meet Brian Falchuk. And then Brian reached out to me and said like, hey, I have this Future of Insurance series. Would you be interested to write a book on the Asian insurance market? So that happened. It was a year ago now that my book came out. Also, international bestseller, thanks to Brian, who, already had a great audience and, built that brand. But also I think people are just interested in what is happening in Asia, especially when it comes to digitization and, new ways, alternative forms of distribution, etc. And yeah, it's been great, and also great to be back here and catching up with Michael today and with you, Jeff. So thanks for having us.
That's a great story. And I just had Brian on my podcast.
Brian is
talking about post ITC reflections from this year. And he was like, oh, I speak Mandarin, I speak Cantonese. And I'm like, what? He live in Singapore, live in Hong Kong, live in Beijing. I'm like, this is crazy. Like how randomly this guy from Boston, right?
Right.
And he's a great guy. I really had a good time talking to him on the podcast, and a 15-minute podcast went to 90 minutes. But Theresa, that's a short story of yours. I'm sure we can dig deeper and find some fun ones in there. And Michael, go ahead. Your turn now.
So I just want to first say thank you very much for the kind comments earlier. The other thing I want to say is that the Asia InsurTech podcast and frankly InsurTech Amplified would not exist without Theresa Blissing. This is not possible. We could do a whole podcast about how amazing I think she is. And the way she built this from the beginning, I went back into my calendar and I searched for Blissing. And the first call we had with each other was March 14th, 2019. But I think, Jeff, the most important part about this is just the discipline and dedication to getting this thing done. I remember sitting in a meeting with Theresa. She said, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to record 5 episodes. This was in April because I said, I have that in my calendar as well. She said, if we're going to do this, we're going to start recording in April and we're launching on May 15th. Do I have that right, Theresa?
I think it was,
May 1st?
it was
Something
also,
like that.
we had this, collaboration for the launch with the Asia Insurance Review, and they had this conference, and we recorded also at the conference then in May, something like that.
And I think I remember the microphone that we used was, I think, probably like the microphone
you
from my
remember the
cell
first
phone.
time when we had the panel and we were like, handing
passing
the
it around.
Oh.
I mean, and just Tyson's experience that day was pretty amazing. Anyway, the whole start of this, Jeff, was insane. And none of it would be here without Theresa. And I could go on and on about this for hours, but I don't want to embarrass her. But my background is really straightforward.
Also for background, sorry, Michael, when Michael and I met, Michael was already running the Asia Tech podcast. So he was already a podcaster, and I just, the work I was doing like some research on emerging insurtechs. And at that time, there was a lot of buzz around, all the lemonades and the French insurance bought by many, etc. But there was very little information on what was happening in Asia. Like there was hardly any media coverage also by, insurance magazines. And that's when, I came to get to meet Michael. I said, like, we should do this because there's so many amazing companies that are, emerging in the insurance space in Asia. And we have to tell these stories. We have to provide this platform for, these companies to get some visibility, for these amazing entrepreneurs to tell their story. And Michael took on the challenge and stuck to my tight deadline. And here we are.
Let me just say this too. Since I'm not from the insurance industry, and I'll tell you what my background is in a sec. I said a lot of funny things at the beginning, probably like for the first 6 months. And Theresa and I just used to laugh about it after I was done recording. She was like, that's not what that is. And it was a ton of fun. I feel like I've learned a lot. I'm nowhere near ready to write a book. That's something I'm never going to do, but I've definitely learned a lot in the last 5 years. Anyway, it was a great experience. It still continues to be a great experience for me. My background is easy. Although I don't look Asian, I feel like I've lived in Asia for the past 34 years. So my entire adult life has been in Asia, split mainly between Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Bangkok. And most of that was with Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs. And I just figured out really early on in my career, frankly, I figured out in college that technology was going to make the world more productive. And no matter what role I had, I was always trying to say, how can we use this computer, taking real-time data, to make the stuff we do more productive? And I feel like I was doing fintech before it was a term, definitely in the mid-90s for sure. And as we came into all of the startup stuff that happened at the beginning of the 2000s and in the 2010s, and even now, like these fintech conversations and insurtech conversations are they're natural for me at some level because I love this confluence of tech and business, and I could talk about it for hours.
Michael, tell us a little bit about your background story with trading and in the financial industry before you got into.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, actually. I studied economics in college, and I had originally gone to university to become a lawyer, right? So in my family, my brother was the designated doctor since he was way smarter than I was. My parents were like, okay, you're a little disappointing, so why don't you go to law school? And I just wasn't interested in it at all. I was so much more interested in the economy and economics. So that's what I studied when I was in school. And I remember my first semester, is that true? My first semester, my senior year. I had no idea what I was going to do after school. And some kid who had graduated the year before came back to talk to us about career day. And he was like, I'm working on Wall Street. I had no idea what Wall Street was. And you can make this amount of money if you like get hired as an associate. And I'm like, okay. Cause I grew up poor. So to me, like being able to make money that fast, that early and that young in my life, I was like, that's what I'm doing. And he made it sound really exciting. And, back then it was 1987. And back then, like Wall Street was just about to take off globally. I had studied Japanese when I was in college as well. And the Japanese, if you remember back then, were like buying Rockefeller Center. They were buying Pebble Beach Golf Course. They were doing all this stuff in the United States. So it was really prominent. And I was like, if I can leverage this Japanese thing into like a decent job, I think I can win. Anyway, I had so many interviews as I was graduating from school. And I kind of had the pick of the litter I was offered 12 jobs when I was graduating. And I feel like I was born like literally like on the right day in the right year at the right time. And if I'd been born like 2 years earlier, I probably would have been a lawyer. And 5 years later, I would have been a consultant. But because I was born in 1965, Wall Street was just the thing, and international Wall Street was the thing, and the Japanese thing just like supercharged my career. And it worked, basically.
What was the day that you decide I am going to do this? What was the single factor that led you over, say, I'm going to create a podcast show? Was there anybody else like Michael that inspired you in your past?
Definitely. John Gruber, easily. So not only was I into tech, but I actually bought the first iMac. Okay, so when I was in college, again, I was poor, right? So I was writing my papers on a typewriter and a borrowed typewriter because I couldn't afford my own typewriter. And back then they had this thing called whiteout, right? So if you were typing and you were 3/4 down the page and you made a mistake, you couldn't just like put another piece of paper in. You use this thing called whiteout. It was like white paint that you put on the piece of paper and then you typed over it. And one day I saw a kid walking around with a Mac. He was like carrying it around. And I'm like, dude, what is that? He was like, oh, it's a Mac 2 SC. I can't remember what the actual model was. And I'm like, what can you do on it? He said, well, there's word processing and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, okay. Can I borrow that? And it changed my whole life, because now I could write my papers. And, back then you're writing 25, 35 page papers. If you have to do it on a typewriter, it's a nightmare. So first what you would do is write it by hand, right? Anyway, so I was super into Macs. Fast forward like 15 years and I'm listening and I'm, just rooting around on the net and I see this thing called the Daring Fireball. I'm like, what is this? It's just a blog. But the blog also had a podcast called The Talk Show. And this guy, John Gruber, wrote this thing called the Link Blog and also did a podcast about Apple stuff. And I'm like, that sounds like something super cool to do. And he basically had like a rotating group of people that came on the show, all of his friends that were also in the same ecosystem. And he started it when he had another full-time job. And I thought, I'm going to try this. And I've never been afraid of talking to people. I was always the guy at work when we had these kind of offsites where they said, like, if there were 10 tables of people and one person from each table had to go on stage and do something, the table always looked at me and said, wait, so you're going to go up on stage? I'm like, fine. So I've always been super comfortable doing that. And I remember it was back in 2016. I was like, you know what? I'm starting a podcast. I'm doing it. Because I'd been a limited partner in a venture capital fund here. And I started getting really connected to a lot of the startups, a lot of the venture capitalists in Asia and Southeast Asia. And when we went to raise money for a company now that's probably worth $1 billion, nobody understood what was going on out here, particularly in the United States. And I thought, that's why I'm starting it. I need to tell people about the Southeast Asian tech ecosystem. And I just literally just started recording. I started calling people and I just started recording. Yeah.
Michael, it's fair to say that, in 2016 in Asia, the podcast was not a thing.
No, and when I started,
it had taken off in the US already, and maybe in Europe, but Asia it was not a thing.
And of course, everybody said to me, "No one's going to listen to this podcast," and they said no one in Asia is going to listen to podcasts because nobody does. And to be fair, they were right. at the beginning. They were definitely right. They're wrong today, but they were right then.
Theresa, I went back and looked at our first message, by the way. August 31st, 2023. And then you invited me to go on the show. And you're like, hey, I had a conversation with David Gritz. And then David Gritz, I guess, recommended me is the one link. And then I am on the podcast. But can we talk numbers a little bit? How many people in Asia listen to podcasts? I know that's a big number, but do you guys have some data of how many people in Asia listen to podcasts? And what does your audience size look like? What does your download look like? And do you guys know your breakdown of downloads by country? Thank you for watching this video. Now a quick message from our sponsor, Mav.
Thanks, Jeff. I want to let you all in on a secret that top producing agencies don't want you to know about. If you're in P&C insurance, you know firsthand how much you're getting squeezed by your call center. It's becoming less predictable and less economically profitable to scale. But here's the thing. The top producing agencies making over $100 million are not running their leads through a human-based call center. They're running them through an AI expert like Mav to qualify, quote, and hand deliver the highest intent qualified leads to your agents. Mav takes care of the back and forth, having unlimited 24/7 conversations with your leads that are personal and relevant so you can scale to the moon. Ready to ditch your call center and 10x your agency? We're giving the listeners of insurtech $15,000 worth of credit to try Mav. Head to hiremav.com/insurtech to claim this offer.
Don't know that data off the top of my head. Yeah, I mean, I used to have a list of the top 10 countries, but I don't have it in front of me right now. But I will say this. The top 3 countries for sure, for all of the podcasts that we do, are in no particular order: the United States, Singapore, and India. And then it's guest dependent, right? Which means that if I have a guest from Indonesia, and I get a lot of listeners from Indonesia. If we have a guest from Singapore, obviously we have a lot of more listeners from Singapore. Malaysia is the same thing. Vietnam for sure. If we have a guest from Vietnam on, tons of listeners from Vietnam. It's hard to measure exactly how many people listen, but I will say this: no matter where Theresa and I go, no matter where it is, everybody asks us about the Asia InsurTech podcast. Everybody.
I was just thinking about that, right? Because and Jeff, you will feel the same thing, right? When you start doing a podcast, it's hard to understand what the impact is and how many people are actually listening. And the podcast on insurance was a really new thing, and we started in May 2019. And I was at the InsurTech Insights, was the first InsurTech Insights conference in Asia, which was in Hong Kong. And I was in the bathroom, and this lady came to me who was working for an innovation lab of a big insurer. And she was like, "Oh my God, you're Theresa." And I'm like, "Yeah." And she was like, "I love your podcast. It's so good. My entire team, everyone is listening." And that was literally the first time where I, knew like we are making a difference, and people are listening. And I still remember that.
I want to give you another example. This happened to me last year, I think. So I was working with Zurich Insurance in Singapore on some recordings for them. And they had invited, let's just say somebody had a very senior partner who was in charge of their insurance practice at some consulting company. I don't want to say who it is. And I was super excited to have him there. And he walked in. Remember, he's a partner at this gigantic global consulting company, and his focus is insurance. And I was just really excited. He walked into the room. He walked into the studio that we set up in Zurich's office. And he came over, and I just said, "Hi, my name is Michael Waitze." And he goes, "I know you." He goes, "I love this show you do. It's amazing." And I'm like, "You know me?" It was just so strange. So the impact is there for sure.
One day, I'm going to go to one of those ITC Singapore or InsurTech Insights Hong Kong event with you guys. Just walk around with rock stars. This is what it's like to walk around with royalty.
I mean, I can tell you so many. Go ahead.
Michael and I, we have really been one of the first in Asia to focus on insurtech, to focus on, how technology is reshaping the insurance industry. It was before all the, big conferences, ITC and insurtech insights were coming to Asia, like, the literally the first one was Hong Kong with InsurTech Insights. There was supposed to be ITC Singapore in 2020, but that obviously did not happen. I've been speaking at lots of conferences in like 18, 19 across Asia. And yeah, we were just really one of the first people to really bring what is happening in insurtech and in insurance innovation in Asia to people and to listen. Nowadays, every insurance magazine is focusing on insurtech, is focusing on AI, Gen AI. It's everywhere. But when we started, there was hardly anyone talking about it, and especially not the insurance incumbents. So it was a really different time. It's crazy to think it was only 5 years ago, but it was really new.
Yeah. And Jeff, the other interesting thing about this show in particular is that, frankly, we get a lot of reverse inquiry. Can I be on the show? And that's actually super cool. A lot of people want to get onto the Asia InsurTech podcast, and that's super neat as well.
How's your selection like? You said there's times people want to get on, they cannot get on. Is there criteria? What do you guys look for in your guest? I'm just now curious.
Well, it's a good question, right? And Michael, curious to hear what you say. I always like getting founders on because it's a very different conversation. It's a very open conversation. From insurance incumbents, we had the CEO for Asia from Swiss Re on a show. We had Jonathan Larson from Ping An. I think it was even in the first year. These are great speakers.
Yeah,
but they are obviously a bit more careful what they are talking about because they're representing big corporations, and it's understandable. So it's really when you have a founder with a great story, and especially if it is a story where they started a company because a need they saw for themselves, something they experienced themselves. I think those are always at least my favorites. And then it's not so much about how big is this startup, but how interesting is the story, and how can it help shape the way people are thinking about insurance?
Yeah. And I agree with everything Theresa said. And I also look for the possibility of growth, right? And the interesting stories. And I want to have founders or co-founders, not for me. I always tell people this, it's not for my ego. It's just that the listeners want to hear about people that are doing something new and doing something different. And one of the other things, Jeff, and I'm sure I said this to you during our prep call, is I feel like well-educated, hardworking people can be good at anything they try. And that word good is chosen very carefully. But to be great at something, right, to be truly great at something, you have to care about it. I don't want to talk to a founder who's building something just to fill a market gap because they think they can make some money. And let me give you my perfect example, not on the Asia InsurTech podcast, but in the insurance space. I did a recording with a guy named Eduardo Dalla Maggiore, okay? And when I asked him why he started this, he told this story, and I love telling it. He said when he and his brother were kids, right, like early teens, I think it was, he said he was driving in a car with his mom and dad. This is in South America. His father had a stroke and died, and the family had no insurance. And it basically put them in poverty for the next 15 years. And he said that was really hard. So not only like losing a parent was hard, but just having no coverage and no protection was just really hard. And then, he and his brother went to school, made some money, did well for themselves before they started this company. And their mother was then diagnosed with cancer, but they had coverage because they'd learned. And he essentially built this company called Betterfly to provide like benefits to companies so that other people, just like he was in a similar situation, didn't have to be in a situation where they had no coverage. He cares. And that's the kind of founder that I want to talk to, right? But having said that, there are a whole bunch of people out there, right, that work at incumbent insurers and reinsurers who really are committed to making change. And they just have a different perspective on what that change should look like and how that change should be affected. And I love talking to them as well, because for those guys and gals to actually have impact inside of a big organization, they have to be a really special kind of person to be able to affect that change, right? If you're building a startup, by definition, you have a ton of agency. But inside of a big company, to grab that agency and run with it and actually change things and modernize, work with insurtechs, build an internal thing that's different, that's hard. And I love talking to those people as well.
Yeah. And caring enough in a corporate environment to do the hard things.
Yeah.
Is also often, I find, quite rare. You know, you have a lot of people that have some good ideas, but taking or doing what it takes to, you know, get it through the door, fight the, you know, often there's a lot of behavioral change required, cultural change required. So this is hard. And I feel like people who are working for a big corporation, they have a different drive. And yeah, people who have that and bring such projects, you know, through the door, that's also really, really impressive. I've worked for, you know, my corporate share. It is difficult to create change in big organizations.
So now we're coming to the end of the year. You know, I pay attention to you guys. You guys start doing your podcast. Is there anything you guys got coming in 2025 that's we should sneak behind the curtain?
Good question. I mean, normally, Micah, we have to do this. It's almost November. Crazy.
I know we have to do it.
Normally, at the end of the year, we always do like the top 10 episodes, which is again a bit difficult to judge. You know, who are the top 10 episodes? Is it, you know, the most listeners? And that's normally how we do it. The most listeners in the first week after a podcast is released, because otherwise, obviously, podcasts that come out a bit later in the year have a disadvantage. But that's normally a fun thing we are doing at the end of the year, at least for the Asia InsurTech podcast. And I think this year we should do it for the first time for InsurTech Amplified. Last year, we just had started, but it's always a good way to like look back at the year and also look back at, you know, the conversations we had and the topics that people talked about in that year.
Yeah, so we should mention this too, Jeff. So when Theresa moved out of the region and moved to the United States, she recommended, and I agreed with this decision, to start a show outside of Asia, which we called InsurTech Amplified. So taking all the experience and all the learnings that we had from building the Asia InsurTech podcast, we said, let's do the same thing, but let's do it outside of Asia. She came up with a great name. I love this, Amplified. And we've already done 45 episodes. So what we do now is we rotate 1 week on for AIP, 1 week on for InsurTech Amplified. And combined, we've done 350 episodes between the two shows, approximately, including some monthly roundups that we do too, which don't have numbers on them. So I don't remember exactly how many monthly roundups we've done. But that probably gets us to about 350. But another big thing that's coming for us is we've done a lot of work, if you don't mind me saying this, Theresa, we've done a lot of work on what I'll call like one of my, so the Asia Tech podcast that Theresa brought up earlier is not just one of our biggest shows, but it's also a test bed where we test ideas. And frankly, we've been testing moving our recordings from audio only onto YouTube. In a way, we feel like it's still early days for this type of stuff on YouTube. And we've done a ton of work on how to understand like getting to the right audience, getting the right message out, getting the right guests and stuff like that. And frankly, we've been very successful in testing on the Asia Tech podcast. And without giving too much away, we're going to roll out some of those learnings to both Amplified and to the Asia InsurTech podcast as we move into 2025. And what we think is going to happen is we're going to have way more impact. We've had a ton of impact already, which we've talked about. But I think that that's going to lead us to way more impact as well. And Theresa reminds me of this all the time. But the one I think overriding difference between a lot of the other people that podcast in the insurance and insurtech space and what we do is this is our full-time job, right? So I don't have another job. I'm not building a carrier. I don't run an MGA. You know what I mean? I don't have my own insurtech. I wake up every single day. Like, I'll put you this way. In this week alone, I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 prep calls. And I had to actually stop recording this week because we're going to be doing some really fun stuff again at the Singapore FinTech Festival. But the point is that we're professionals at this, right? And that's one of the big differentiators. We're consistent and we're always trying to up the game on our production level and also in our ability to reach an audience and figure that out. And that's coming in 2025 for sure.
Yeah. And also, you know, Michael is also doing podcasts for insurance carriers here in Asia, you know, building studios, building the equipment. Like I have the, you know, honor to be in his studio here in Bangkok. And, you know, as you can see from the setup, it's a whole different experience, having a professional studio, having, the equipment needed, etc.
Having a studio is nice. That's my next goal. But what do you guys see the difference in the insurtech scene, Theresa? Especially, you go back and forth, right, between Asia and US. You've seen it in ITC, you've seen it in insurtech insights. What are the different scene trends that you see between the two? Thank you for all your support to our channel. Here is a quick word from our sponsor. Please click on the link below in the comment section to sign up for a demo with Track AI.
What if your insurance sales conversations could work harder for you? Meet Track, your AI-powered conversation intelligence partner. Track automatically captures and analyzes every customer interaction, providing instant call summaries, risk analysis, and AI-driven coaching insights. Say goodbye to manual note-taking and hello to more selling time. Track handles the admin work while you handle the revenue. Fully integrated with your favorite platforms. Plus, get custom AI analysis tailored to your unique business needs. Transform your sales team's performance with Track. Visit track.ai today.
Click the link in the description below to schedule a demo with Track today.
That's a good question. And I think the biggest difference is that in Asia, and you can't really generalize Asia, but I've been focusing mostly on Southeast Asia, India, so more developing countries. There you have still a lot of growth. If you look at countries like Indonesia, where you have 50% of the population under the age of 30, a growing economy, it's just a different market. There's still a lot of room for growth. At the same time, Indonesia has one of the lowest insurance penetrations worldwide. So there are a lot of insurtechs out here that are focusing on making insurance more accessible, finding alternative forms of distribution, plugging in with digital ecosystems, which are also very different compared to what we see in the US, right? If you look at, Grab, one of the super apps here in Southeast Asia, and how they are integrating insurance into their platform. So for example, the drivers who are working for Grab, they can decide to have a small part of their fare going into a critical illness coverage. So this is taken directly from their fare and provide like this micro coverage on critical illness. And what is exceptional is these people have often never bought insurance before. They have very low financial literacy. But the way they have integrated that into, their daily lives, into these ecosystems, making it really easy to understand and really easy, to participate, taking away that burden of having to pay an upfront fee for an insurance, but instead, allowing them to have a part of their, each ride they are doing, a few cents can go into this critical illness coverage. And that's what I find really fascinating. Also, I would argue that in terms of digitization, a lot of Asian countries, if you look at a country like India, are ahead of the US, and there are reasons for that. They were often able to leapfrog certain development stages, right? Where the Western world has gone through, if you look at payments, for example, the US used to be the one who started with like credit cards and like semi-digital payment methods, right? A lot of Asian countries have leapfrogged that credit card stage and went straight into mobile payments. So from that perspective, I think there are a lot of really interesting concepts coming from Asia, which are not necessarily applicable to a market like the US because you have a different infrastructure. In the US, I find you have more these insurtechs, which are enablers, which are helping insurance incumbents on, one or more parts of the insurance value chain, in claims, in, fraud detection, in underwriting, etc. I think the US is definitely leading when it comes to those enablers of the insurance value chain. But when it comes to alternative forms of distribution, digitizing, the sales process, and I think especially attracting a younger generation to insurance products. I think that's where Asia is leading in that space. Michael, I don't know what.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have much to
as
add there, except maybe a little bit of subtext and detail. So the Unified Payments Interface in India, which was, co-developed with the government there, has just changed the way that money moves around the economy, right? So that kind of digitalization is just way ahead of anything else in the rest of the world. Pay now in Singapore, prompt pay in Thailand, which means that like I almost never carry cash. But it also means that when I pay my insurance premium, I can just pay it digitally, right? So it's really simple and really straightforward. And to be fair, all the communication that I have with my insurance company is online, meaning on a chat app.
Yeah, so online line is
the name of a chat app, yeah.
Or it's like a WhatsApp but on steroids. So you can pay your insurance, you can shop things directly. It's similar to WeChat, which I guess more people know from China. And also like paying online. I guess a lot of people say like, well, I use my credit card, I also pay online, but it's a different user experience if you have like a digital wallet.
Because there's no PIN number, there's no nothing. You just do this stuff digitally. And I will say this too, there is a movement to connect UPI in India, prompt pay in Thailand, and the digital payment system in Singapore as well. If it hasn't happened already, although I think it has, but I don't want to say that definitively, which means then that when I go to Singapore, I can just scan, I can just QR code scan stuff to pay. And it's just a game changer for me.
One subject I've seen a lot of people avoid talking about, well, just don't talk about it. When they're talking about insurtech Asia, this and that, China, right? China is a big spear, and they trying to bring little planet around them. It's ecosystem. And now that we just had a BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia, but they unveiled the first note of the BRICS. So my question, since there are three type of companies, right? You have your regional carriers in Asia. You have your G7 Western influence carriers like Generali, Chubb, and UK companies who are dominating in Asia and focus to grow in Asia. If all the BRIC nations, which is most of the nations that you guys mentioned in the Asia sphere, if they start settling all their payments on BRICS, I am so curious how the Western insurance carriers going to adapt to it.
So I think this is just me, but I think we are still far away from having global payments settled in a currency that's not the US dollar. Let's see what happens in the next election to see like how much influence the US maintains or retains. But I just don't think people are going to be settling in Russian rubles, in India rupees, in Brazilian real, in South African rand, and in Chinese yuan. I just don't think it's going to happen. It's so hard to get rid of a reserve currency. Every currency in the world, for every country in the world, for better or for worse, and we can spend hours, debating this, holds dollars in some form for a reason. And unless there's some kind of massive calamity, I don't see that changing. So settling in, and unless they start settling in cryptocurrency, which again, I don't think is going to happen either. Like Bitcoin is great, but nobody pays for anything with it yet. It's a speculative currency. It's a speculative thing more than anything else. And the rest of the cryptocurrencies don't have enough liquidity. So you can have central bank digital currencies that people will settle in, sure, but you're still going to get back to this idea of, do you want to hold rubles? Like, really? In other words, if I said to you, Jeff, I love your car, I know you're trying to sell it, let me give you some South African rand for that. Are you going to sell me your car in rand? Really?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. So I don't think that's a question yet, unless I misunderstood your question. I just don't think we're close to that happening. Again, for better or for worse, right?
There was a period where people give up their native currencies and they went to euros. So I'm just thinking in my head, since the note just got revealed a couple of weeks ago, if that's happening in the future.
It's just going to take time, right? I mean, look, in the old days, the reserve currency of the world was the British pound, right? But that has not been the case for over 100 years. I think we have like another 20 or 30 years. I don't think the euro itself is strong enough. Again, if I came to you and I'm like, I love your car, here's like 100,000 euros. Would you really take it? It's just a pain, right? But if I go to somebody in Europe and say, here's $1 million, they're going to take it without thinking about it.
Yeah.
And the same thing in Japan.
What about AI? So I went to ITC Connect, ITC Vegas this year, and 600 vendors, but it felt like you wasn't even in an insurance conference. You were at an AI conference. I mean, what do you guys seeing over there?
I mean, it's, you know, it's a big topic everywhere. I just and you know, all the large insurance carrier are doing, you know, some type of AI. But I think it is a bit oversold in a way. Like I had a call the other day with a person from you know, one of the leading insurers in the world, who's an actuary. And, you know, I was quite shocked, but he was like AI and, you know, talked about startups, and he was like, startups in the insurance industry. So what I think is, you know, all of us here, we are constantly engaging with other startups, with, you know, like the innovation departments of insurance carriers. But the reality still looks very traditional. And yes, every carrier is experimenting here and there. And, you know, Gen AI is obviously a big topic this year. But especially the older carriers, like the major carriers, with their legacy systems, it is quite difficult to adopt you know, general AI strategy. And by general AI strategy, I mean something that, you know, works across lines of business, that works across, you know, the insurance value chain. Again, I think companies that have not that legacy, and, you know, we see quite a few younger insurers here in Asia, that they will have an advantage to adopt AI at a larger scale just because they have less legacy. And also they are more open to digitization in general. Like in my book, I have this example of Ping An, which is actually not an old company. They started in the 80s. They're about 40 years old. And they were one of the first companies that moved their entire operation into the cloud. I have to look it up, but I think they completed it by 2016. You know, at a company at that scale, they are the largest or second largest insurance company in the world. They're the largest motor insurance company in the world. When they started, there were hardly any privately owned cars in China. But because they were always embracing change, and they were embracing, you know, digital business models, plus they did not have that long of a legacy, they were able to do that and are now in a much better position to adopt wide-scale AI solutions. But I think a lot of the, you know, leading carriers who just have these decades and sometimes centuries of legacy, it will be quite difficult. And like talking to people who are not involved in the innovation part, who are not involved with like startups, talking to them, I keep realizing that, yeah, they're not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, at some level, it's like putting the engine of a Ferrari in a Ford Fairmont, right? Like, it's great to have, but it's probably going to blow the car up. Can I just say this as well? I want to make the really controversial point that what happens at a conference may not necessarily be indicative of actually what's happening at the carriers themselves. And I think part of the reason why is, why does the conference exist, right? So every year they've got to come up with a new topic, and they're chasing topics, to be fair. And I was just making a little note to myself, but if we went back like 4 or 5 years, you could probably say that, and I haven't checked the agenda, I was trying to find it, but like you could probably find all cloud providers 5 years ago. And then maybe it was insurance in the metaverse like 4 years ago. And then it was big data, right? And machine learning.
And it was embedded insurance.
Then it was embedded insurance. And then it was generative AI. And I think all of these things are solutions looking for a problem. But the other thing is, you can't wake up tomorrow. And I know this from when I was working at Goldman Sachs. It took a long time to wean ourselves off of those embedded systems. I mean, those the existing systems, right? The incumbent systems and the legacy systems, because just finding people that actually knew how to use the new stuff was hard. But you had all these people that knew how to write like stuff for the old mainframe systems that we used, right? Or for Sun microstations. But once we wanted to move to new technology, it was just hard to find people that could write in like Ruby on Rails, simple stuff like that. And there's just not a lot of people out there that understand like how generative AI works or how to actually write code about it. And sure, you can ask the large language model to write the code for you. But at the end of the day, you have to understand what you're doing. And there's no like real great pool of Gen AI experts out there, right? And
Yeah,
big companies are afraid of new technology. Sorry, go ahead, Theresa.
No, that's a fair point. Like, there's a talent shortage and also I would say a cultural issue, right? And I have seen this with insurance companies, insurance carriers I worked with. So they were trying to attract talents, in the AI space, etc. But they were, first of all, difficult to find. And when they found people, they actually had a turnover rate of 100% per year, because people they managed to hire found themselves in a company where, the culture was not there, change was not embraced. So at the end, they decided to leave. But you need these people to change the culture and to, build these infrastructure. So it's a little bit of like a chicken and egg problem.
Yeah.
And I think it will take some time for the insurance industry to be able to change the culture, to, embrace change and get these talents to really implement this throughout the insurance value chain.
That's a great point. I think when you're the best talent of anything, yes, you can go to these big insurance carriers, but if you're that great of talent, SpaceX or, Amazon is waiting for you.
Yeah, correct. And also, I think this is changing slowly, but also data scientists, or, you wonder why the insurance industry is not leading in like data science, because the whole business model is based on data. So the insurance industry should have been the one who came up with, this new, job description, etc. But this is not the reality. And actuaries, people who work for insurance companies, they have often spent their entire life there. They are often overwhelmed with like, advanced data analytics, etc. And those people are also not paid very well. At least in the past, that used to be the case, because a lot of money is going into marketing, into sales, because insurance is still a product that, is sold instead of bought. So a lot of the profits a lot of the money is going into the sales channels, and traditionally not as much into, the actuarial department and these kinds of things. It's slowly changing because people realize, okay, this is important and we have to invest in that areas. But again, that's an issue the insurance industry has to attract those talents. And that's where, great startups, insurtechs can come in with their solutions, because in-house it is often for insurance carriers, especially the smaller ones, impossible to do in-house.
Everything you just said is like a whole show, like with like 20 mini episodes by itself, that it should be a show. Who's gonna?
That's why we never run out of content. There's so much stuff to talk about, right, Jeff?
Yeah, but like I think like if maybe three of us can think about something, but the insurance company doesn't do a good job attracting the best talent, and nobody talk about that because the smartest people doesn't come to our industry, in my opinion. I'm talking about tech, just tech.
Yeah, and I can tell you why. Like, I move a lot. I lived on like 4 different continents in the past 4 years, and therefore I meet a lot of new people. My husband is not in the insurance industry. And so whenever I meet someone and I tell them that I work in insurance, like the reactions are never great. Like never anybody says like, oh my God, that's so interesting. Right. I also now say like, I work in insurance innovation, because I'm also tired of people telling me about their bad claims experience, or they're asking me for advice. And, but yeah, it's not fun, telling people you are in insurance, because it has a very bad reputation. It has the reputation And I think this is actually more so in the US and in Europe, that it's the necessary evil. It's just like big companies who always try to screw you over, who are not paying your claim, etc. Right? So that has also an impact on people wanting to join the industry. So, on top of changing culture and being a more attractive employer, I think the insurance industry also has to do something to improve their image.
I just want to make a point here, right? Because I've seen a sea change in the way, and I think it's a little bit reflexive, meaning when Theresa and I first started the Asia InsurTech podcast, a lot of the people we would have on the show would say things like, I know it's kind of boring and nobody really cares, but, and then they'd talk about like the thing that they were working on. And over time, I've seen that reverse itself. The people to whom I speak, both on InsurTech Amplified and on the Asia InsurTech podcast, are stoked about what they're doing. And I think that's a big change.
It's a bubble, Michael. It's the people who are working on, these innovative topics, who are, going to conferences like ITC, that's the cool people in insurance, but that's, I don't know, maybe 5%. The majority of people who are working in insurance are, don't see that change.
When we first started recording, even the people that were supposed to be cool didn't feel cool, but now they're starting to feel cool. Think about it.
That's true.
And this, I know this for a fact. Before like the late 1980s, like being a bond trader was just like a job that some idiot did. Seriously. And then Wall Street started kind of advertising themselves as like, yeah, big tough guys, right? And everything changed. Seriously. And I think the same thing, at least I feel it, and maybe I'm in a bubble, so fair enough, right? Because I talk to people in the insurance industry every day. And that's insurtechs, that's investors and incumbents. And, next week I'm going to be at the Singapore FinTech. That's why I'm going to be talking about insurance. I'm doing 16 episodes there talking about like FinTech and insurtech. So maybe I am in a bubble, but I see this slowly changing. And I think if insurers did the same things that investment banks did, because to be fair, like an actuary is just as smart as a guy that's trading on the on the proprietary trading desk. They're making risk decisions on massive amounts of money. They're managing that risk on a day-to-day basis. And they're trying to figure out, like, if I do this, or if I offload this risk, or if I underwrite this risk, am I going to make money or not over time? They do portfolio analysis just like a portfolio trader does. Like, I see all these analogies. And I think if the insurance industry wanted to, they could sell themselves as a super sexy place to work because it's kind of cool, I think.
I think we need like a Hollywood blockbuster like Wolf of Wall Street or Top Gun. Top Gun was actually one of the biggest promotion movies for people to join the Navy, military. Right? That's why the military, and that's one of the reasons they produced that film. The first one. So maybe we need some kind of insurance movie that everybody gets excited to join an insurance company and making a career in insurance.
Let's make that movie. We'll call it like Hanging Out in Hartford or something.
No, actually, that was one of my idea. Well,
Hanging Out in Hartford.
Yeah, when I created this company. So I'll pivot the segment if you guys got some more time. One of the thing that I did was, there's legacy media, there's insurtech media, and there's creator media. And it was really the conversation with Michael that inspired me on the creator media, not can I do it, how I do it, but if I do it, what is it worth? I want to make sure that I maximize my time here on this earth, right? So everything I do, I want to be intentional, be purposeful. So and then everything I do, I want to have a great return on investment. Like, even the more I get into it, the bigger it is return on investment than I imagined. And I thought to myself that storytelling has been very wrong in the insurance world for a long time. And storytelling are told by the people who never been to insurance industry, didn't come from insurance industry. And they are literally just graduating out of college with journalism skills, learning journalism degrees. And then now they're writing stories about billions and billion-dollar companies. And I said to myself, you know what? Storytelling should be done by, people from insurance.
By the participants.
By the participants, exactly.
So Jeff, this is why, look, we've talked about this, and I'm going to tell you exactly how I feel about this. And I said this to you before, but I'll say it publicly now. And I say it publicly a lot, but I'll say it publicly to you now. I think every company should be their own media company.
Yeah.
And the reason
100%.
why is because if somebody else is telling your story, one, they're not going to tell it as well as you do because they don't have the same passion about it that you do. Two is they don't have the same number of information as you do, and they don't have a vested interest in telling that story in the best possible way. And that's why what Theresa and I do is so important, is because we create an environment where those stories can get told by the people that are living it every single day, right? And
Yeah.
Theresa gave a perfect example. The reason for Top Gun was to promote people going into the Navy. But you don't think the Navy was involved in producing that movie? Sure they were, because they were telling their own story, and they probably gave the producers and directors and the actors of that movie access to a whole bunch of information that they couldn't have had otherwise. We've already built that
including
connectivity.
ships and planes.
Yeah, including ships and planes. And that's why we think we're so good at this, because we feel like we already have the ships and planes, and we're already talking to the captains and the generals as well, and the people in officer school. So yeah, I completely agree with you.
I also think like outside of our conversation, Michael, I really have talked to, so I, the show called Industry Voice, and I have interviewed so many influencers in the insurance space, speakers, book writers, and people who have their own podcasts. I think you think like the 1%ers, and most of them don't do this full time. Most of them don't put a focus on this. And they don't understand the value they bring to the table. And their economics mindset of what they're doing, telling stories, is completely wrong. So I hope I can do some creative things, and in the next 60 days, you will see some of them coming out, and that will change the landscape of valuation. Earlier we have slide decks, we have pro formas, we have all these things when we launch a thing. On my team, I have 3 full stack developers, and some of the things we're building is cool, and it's actually not just by myself. And we have a lot of native content creator coming, and we are building a platform. So I'm not building a podcast, I'm building a platform.
Yeah, same here.
Some of the things I love to share with you guys.
It's the low-hanging fruit. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, some of the things I love to share with you guys. Might have to be offline, but
Why?
Because there's a lot of things in the works. So, and
very exciting.
And
I think time is still right. But like, especially there are a lot of podcasts, but I feel a lot of them are talking about like the wrong issues, or it's a lot of like, self-promotion from some of them. But I think there's still so much to do and so much possibilities in the insurance industry. So yeah, I'm excited to see what you have planned.
Same.
Oh, I hope, it's also like once one person do something and the rest follow, the rest copy, and then start innovating, push each other to innovations. And that's the only way to continue to bring more valuation to the entire space, right? Like if one person grow, it doesn't elevate and lift up the entire space. It has to be 2, 3, 5 people continue to challenge each other and grow. So I think that's how our space can get lifted in what we're worth, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing it.
I believe one of the reasons why a lot of insurance companies are like the old incumbents are struggling to innovate. Like when I was working for Generali, my boss started his career at Generali and retired as the CEO. Like all of the senior management has spent their entire lives working for the same company. There is nobody challenging anyone, right? There's no new ideas coming in. And, that is the case for a lot of insurance companies, because insurance is traditionally a job where people are a bit more conservative going in. They, just want to have a stable job, a stable income. But that creates an environment where people are not embracing change, where people are not challenging each other, where, it's just, and these, what's the saying? Never change a running system. You know how many times I heard that during my career? And, one of the reasons is that people are not challenging each other.
Yeah. Like, insurtech insights has been growing like crazy the last few years, and I think everything they're doing over there is now challenging ITC Vegas, and ITC Vegas is now stepping up their game. I went this year, and I told Bill Harris, I was like, this is the best ITC Vegas event I have been to. You know, the energy is different, the crowd's different. There's something different here. And with LATAM, with broker agents, with life and health and benefits, the 3 new segments, I was like, you guys can hit 20,000. You know, you guys been stuck around 7,000, 8,000, but now I can see a pathway for you guys to hit 20,000. And, you know, 2 years ago, InsurTech Insights, Megan running for the first year, and I give her ideas like, you guys should have a podcast segment, like complete real estate space dedicated to podcasts. They did it. ITC Vegas immediately picked it up the next year. So I like that challenge, how they're pushing each other. And Stacy Brown, David Gritz, 2 fantastic, smart people. InsurTech Hartford, and it's always challenging InsurTech New York. They do things together and they do things on their own. Like, I really like the space, but at the end of the day, they command 2 to 3% of the entire insurance space of 4.2 million population in the US.
Yep.
And the podcaster like us, we have the attention span of 97, 98% of the space of the community. So I think,
yeah,
like,
I mean, more people listen to the podcast than attend every ITC event.
I mean, the attention space is something that
no question, just no question about it.
We don't ever pound our chest and brag, right? But I think I like to highlight other creators, and I like to brag about them because, you know, what we're doing is something different, and that attention is everything.
Yeah, I mean, again, you talked about like what's coming in 2025 for the stuff that we do. We've unlocked something I told you with the Asia Tech podcast, and we're going to unlock it for the rest of the stuff that we do. It's just the beginning. We're still early days, even though we've been at this for a while. It's way early days out here, and yeah, we'll do some big stuff as well.
Do you guys see, like, they say 70 million people listen to podcasts, right? Where like something along that number. I'm just so curious, like
globally.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, what's the growth of Asia podcast in general is like? Maybe I have to go look up some numbers later.
Here's an interesting thing. So the internet is telling me, the Google machine is telling me that there are 550 approximate million podcast listeners worldwide. Half of them are in the United States. And ad spending in 2024, according to whatever this source is, was about $4 billion.
What do you think the ad spend on podcasts is in insurance?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I think it's going to grow like really rapidly. I don't want to tell you what we make, but there are different business models for this, and it's not all ad generated. I will say this though. One of the interesting things about the markets out here, right, is that Indonesia, Vietnam, the Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, Cambodia, Laos, and Singapore all have different languages.
Mm-hmm.
If I do a podcast in the United States, it doesn't matter if it's in Maine or Minnesota, everyone's going to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's in Phoenix or in Florida. Like, it just doesn't matter. So you have this really large addressable market. While English is the language of the educated people out here, there is still some fragmentation. So it's definitely a different market. And there are local podcasts, but they're really, really local. Like, that's one of the things that we found. Right. Again, I know that there are lots of listeners for the stuff that we do in all of the countries that I just mentioned. And we've been at it a lot longer than everybody else, for sure.
Yeah. But I think, still with the, startup insurtech scene, because if you start a startup, you're always looking at expansion. So going into other countries, and then English is just, the language to go to. And I mean, now with, YouTube, translating it into local languages, that also becomes more accessible to people who might not be as fluent in English to understand everything.
When's the next time you're coming back to the States, Michael? So we can hang out in person and maybe do an episode.
I was there last May. Is that true? Last April. I don't know when I'm coming back, actually. But I will definitely let you know. I'd love to sit face to face and do a recording. That would be super duper cool, actually.
That'll be cool. And if we can get Theresa there, and
Well, I actually live in New York, like a lot of people are still surprised by that fact. But yeah, I'm living at the moment in New York for like another year. So you are in Philadelphia, aren't you?
I'm in Virginia.
Oh, Virginia.
Very boring place, but there's a lot of things in the cloud in Virginia. I would say the biggest cloud in the United States is in Virginia.
The biggest cloud.
Yeah. 70% of the world internet run through Ashburn, Virginia. And that's where I live.
What's there? Is that Akamai?
Ever data center in the US.
Yeah, it's in Virginia.
US is 10-to-1 ratio of data center versus China. That's how much more data center we have. And Virginia has the most of them. So it's a boring place. There's no beach. There's no fun mountains, just data centers.
I thought there's Virginia Beach.
Yeah, Virginia Beach is about 4 hours away from me, 4.5 hours.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know anything about Virginia.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is an interesting episode. Really looking forward to see what you guys do, because I know that you're going to be creating stuff, and you are someone I pay attention to. Both everything you guys do, something I study, because everything we do every single day, we try to better our game, better our craft. So it's gonna be a fun year, and watching you guys grow.
Yeah,
Thank you
likewise.
very
And
much.
really, really excited. What do you have planned? So make sure to let us know once you go live.
Yeah, I will.
Maybe we should have
Well,
you back on the on insurtech Amplified for that.
Hey, I love to. I love to come
I
back.
think
You
you
know,
said
it was
it
one of my
anyway.
favorite episodes.
The episode was really interesting, and I think you went way over time, almost an
We
hour,
did.
if I recall. So yeah, I think it's time to have you back on the show.
Yeah, I love to. Well, thank you for joining on the podcast, and we're looking forward to have you guys on again.
Awesome. Anytime, man. I'm happy to jump on anytime you want.
Yeah, no,
Bye-bye.
thanks for having us.